Welcome to the shop. I'm Jared and this is Wrench Every Day. Behind me is our 1971 Johnny Reb International Harvester 1010 muscle truck. Got the Corvette front suspension completely fabricated in and mounted up with the helps of our friends at GRC. I guess we can call them Site C, up in Cleveland, Georgia. And now it's back here where we're gonna do some more prep work on the engines and the transmission to get them put into the car. Hey guys, it's Jared from the future. And by future, I mean like 2 days from when what you're watching was filmed, but that's okay. I'm gonna take a quick second and thank today's partner, Cove Audio. We've done a lot with them because we like to partner and share with you products that we use regularly. And I've got to find that product real quick that we're supposed to show you today. I had it on the table, but it's kind of run off. I found who was using them. Here, let me borrow these back from you. Thank you. Today, we're talking about the Cove Audio Bluetooth active noise canceling headphones. So we've had these headphones in the house for about 3 months now, and we absolutely love them. I say we because my wife gets more use out of them than I do, mainly because she gets a hold of them before I can grab them off the charger. Speaking of charger, you get about 12 hours of battery life. You can charge it, throw it in your bag, and have about 200 hours of standby time. Some of the most use I get out of them is when I'm working around the cars at the house. I don't have my big stereo system in the shop. I'm able to throw them on my head and not worry about snagging them because they're so compact. Another great benefit is when you are out working in the shop, running a lawnmower, taking a hike, whatever you're doing and listening, if you get a phone call and you don't want to have to reach down and grab your phone, or you've got it in your bag, this has a built-in microphone that works fantastic for phone quality. Pick it up, finish a conversation, and the music starts right over. Another real nice feature of these headphones is how well the earmuffs actually do at keeping the sound around your ears so you're not disturbing everyone around you. You can hear just a little bit of a noise. We open it up and you get it blasting full volume. They also operate at about a 30-foot Bluetooth range, so you can have your phone sitting on a desk somewhere safe while you're out doing whatever activity you're using these with. With all these features, I'm sure you're thinking these headphones have a monstrous price tag, but thanks to our long-standing partnership with Cove Audio, we're able to offer you a discount code, WRENCH64, where you can save over 64% on your own headphones. That makes these some of the most affordable active noise canceling Bluetooth headphones with all of these features built in that I've seen, and again, we use very regularly in our household. We'll have the link in the description below that will take you directly to it, coveaudio.com/wrench64. Make sure you check it out and get a pair of your own today. To get you caught up, again, we've got the Corvette suspension and steering rack, everything underneath there. We've still got to build our shock mounts, but that's not stopping us from moving forward. This is the Corvette engine, all aluminum, LS, kind of the holy grail that a lot of people like to use, but instead of using the actual all aluminum LS, we're going to use a Junkyard truck motor. This is a 6-liter. You find them in old work vans, work trucks. They're all over the place. And while they're basically the same architecture, it's a big, heavy iron block, belongs in a truck a little bit more. We have the Corvette motor because we need to change the front accessories. This is where your water pump is, your alternator, power steering pump, everything that runs and are part of making a car work, but they stick too far out. On the truck setup, they're a couple inches further out. So that's this whole front drive here, and you can see it tucks in really close to that power steering rack. We also need to change the oil pan because the Corvette has what they call a bat wing oil pan. We'll show that when it's off and out of the car. It's kind of a funny shape that's unique to it, but because we're using those factory mounts, it'll work well. So we're gonna go ahead, get everything off of this we don't need, and start getting ready to put all the good parts on it. It's a little bit sad looking, taken apart. We're not going to pull and reseal this gasket just yet because we're probably going to end up doing a camshaft in the future. We've got to decide what direction of hot rodding we're going to do. Nitrous, you know, we'll see when that time comes. Also, once the oil pan is off, this is called a windage tray. It helps keep oil in the oil pan and off the crankshaft. If you ever do an LS, this is the most important O-ring to the health of an LS engine. you will destroy one quicker than anything. It goes around your oil pickup tube where it connects to your oil pump. And if this doesn't make a good seal, you're actually going to have it sucking in air, not having enough oil pressure, and destroying an engine quicker than just about anything else you can do, short of pouring in the cash for clunkers, engine destroying stuff. We've still got to get the LS1 out of the engine bay. I'm really liking the idea of turbo, and since it's so far back in there, we have a ton of room for turbo activities, all in this region, this region. I mean, we could put them up here. We've got room for turbos for days, so. Took a little bit of time there, hooked up to the back point, and we're able to work this engine up, kind of rotating it forward, clearing everything that we needed to, leaving the rubber mounts behind. So we're able to go ahead and keep tearing this motor down. We're going to need to take these mounts off. This is an aftermarket crank pulley, so it'll pull a little bit differently with a reusable crank pulley bolt. We'll pull that. We're also going to pull the AC compressor off. I've got a new one coming because unfortunately due to some rust and that front accident damage, this binds up. But we can go ahead and get the rest of these accessories pulled off, pick up some cleaner so we can clean everything up, and dress out the new motor in the morning, and get the transmission bolted to it, start laying out the wiring harness. One fun thing about these oil pans on the Corvettes is they're called bat wings. As you can see, they're kind of a fun, weird, wide setup to clear the subframe. So you have to pull the lower section first, then we can pull the main section like we did on the truck motor. So we're gonna set up, drain a few more fluids, get this pan pulled off of it and the rest of the accessories stripped down, and get ready for some cleanup. And there we go, completely torn apart. Oil pan, all the accessories. We've got 2 engines worth of parts strewn out here. Thankfully, I know where it all goes. Obviously the Corvette stuff. One thing we're having to change over is our flex plate. This is what bolts the engine to the torque converter of the transmission. It has 6 holes on our transmission. The old one only had 4. I'm gonna have to replace the oil pan gasket. When the oil pan was reinstalled, it was glued extra good and came apart, so. The batwing gasket is good, main pan gasket no good. So we'll clean it up. And also we have a whole lot of wiring to do. So we've got that coming up too, modifying the wiring to make everything work. And of course we're installing, like 2004 parts into a 1971. So it's not really plug and play. We've got a little bit of work ahead on that, but we'll pick that up in the morning when we're cleaning that. There we go. Aim the camera better. So we're back for another day of wrenching. We have our furry companion here to judge everything we do. We did a little bit of cleaning off camera because you've seen cleaning. The next step we've got to do is we've got to pull our broken spark plug boots off, and we're going to pull the exhaust manifolds off. A very common problem with the LS engine is, as you can see, some bolts will break. So we are going to pull all these off. If you were in car doing this, you would soak these a lot more, apply some heat. Because we're out of the car and can deal with bolts that break very easily, we're just going to go ahead and pull them and run them off with the gun. Once those are off, we'll show you the best way to try to extract these broken off bolts here. Once that's done, we are going to start fitting all of our accessories in our oil pan. And one thing I'll reiterate, it's what our oil pan even says here. You have to be very careful when installing these things. If you don't follow the procedure right, you're very likely going to have an almost immediate leak. So you got to make sure you align your oil pan and you torque it. That's one thing we're going to do. We don't want oil leaks in our truck, so we will torque that correctly. But let's set up, rip the exhaust manifolds off, get some broken bolts, and start putting things back together. So we have both types of the brakes that you're gonna see if you're working on an LS. The one is where just the head is broken off. There's two ways of doing this one. You can just grab it with some pliers and try to work it out, or what I prefer is to slide a nut over and weld that on, because the heat will actually help break it loose. Back here, we have the more difficult version, and that is where it actually breaks below the surface. You have two options. You can drill this out, or you can again come in and hold a nut over and use a MIG welder and try to weld that to grab on. The heat will help break it loose and then spin that nut off. So we're gonna set up and try to weld a nut onto each of these to extract the broken bolts that way. We've got the oil pans on, we've got motor mounts on, we've got the front accessories. We don't have the alternator or power steering pump on, because if we come up from the bottom and drop the subframe out, those need to be out to clear. So the next thing I'm going to do is put the headers on. Even though we don't expect them to fit, I'm going to go ahead and kind of mount and visualize and see if there's a little bit of massaging we can do to them to bring them in tighter. If not, we will use factory cast manifolds for right now, or we may go ahead and order those hooker cast manifolds that are shown to work just as well as little shorties. Let's put the headers on and see if there's any hope of making them work. What do you think, Pierre? What do you think? As you can tell by Pierre's mood, I don't think there's the ability to get these working. The AC compressor sits almost exactly with the frame. Like if we have to change this, the engine comes up or goes out. We cannot change this in car because the frame is right about like that. So if we follow that line back, obviously the headers live there, and we could dent these some. But the other problem we run into is the frame of the reb comes back and actually starts to kick in and lives about here. So I cannot even see any way of modifying, making these work. This side's almost worse because it's cleared for a steering shaft. Fits a Pontiac GTO great. Turns out it doesn't fit an old international pickup truck with a Corvette subframe. Who knew that wasn't something you could get off the shelf? So I think cast manifolds are pretty much our only option. We're not going to get to do long tubes. It's just which set of cast headers do we order? Do we order the normal non-turbo flippies? Do we get the special ones that hold a spooling device to force air in an engine? It's kind of a hard pick, which is a bummer because these headers actually look really cool hanging off that engine. So we've got another day going on where we're starting to work and fit some of the LS parts together. And I ran into a problem putting the 4L80, the big heavy duty truck transmission, back to our truck engine. This originally had a weaker automatic transmission, so we wanted to upgrade. And I found out, and this is something LS people know, I'm not an LS people, there is an adapter, a spacer that brings this flex plate. This is what connects your engine to the torque converter, so when this spins, parts of the transmission can spin. And when I tried to install it, it was basically touching the back of the motor. That's why I did a little more digging, not knowing LS things. There's a spacer that is required on a short crank LS with a 4L80E, this big heavy duty transmission that you're putting in it. So if you find yourself trying to do this and your flywheel's not working, that's probably the part number you're gonna need. Retail $67, some dealers have them on the shelf. I was able to make a 35-minute drive and pick one up. So now, with just those two bolts, we measure from our cam plate, we are 1 inch. So we can come over to the other engine that had its dished flex plate. If you see, it kind of comes out at an angle. It comes in 1 inch. So we're able to get back on track now. We are going to properly seal and torque up those bolts We're going to then attach the transmission, and then we can start working on the spaghetti, also known as the wiring, and figure out which intake we're going to use and which wiring harness, and kind of make that all into something clean and something that makes sense. Hopefully, maybe. Then we've got our new fuse boxes. We've got all kinds of cool stuff we're going to get started on now. I now pronounce you engine and transmission. We've married them together. I was kind of going back and forth if I wanted to run the truck intake or the car intakes over there. And I've settled on the truck intake for two reasons. One, it gives a little bit more low end torque, which the LS isn't great at. So it's going to help in the truck get that low end moving. And two, it actually positions the throttle body a little bit closer for potential phase 2 of the truck. Still don't have my headers, not a problem. We've got lots of wiring to work through. So this is the truck harness. There are a lot of guides out there that kind of walk you through deleting and turning these into what's called a standalone harness. One of my favorite resources is a website, LT1 Swap. They've got every diagram you could potentially need. They walk you through a couple of the things we're going to need to do. One, how to identify what all of these are and which ones you need to save and delete. If you're wanting to emissions delete, where a 71 truck has no emissions requirements, we can pull a lot of the parts out of this harness, the secondary O2 sensors, the evaporative emission controls, and a few other things we'll get to strip out of the harness. So we're just gonna cut so that way you can see me work through the spaghetti, repin the harness, run it a little bit cleaner out of the rear of the engine bay instead of coming up the front like it used to, and make that a little less that. Let's get you guys up to speed. So we've been working really hard on the wiring. It's one of those things that you can just do the bare minimum and it will work, but I like to go through and take the time and clean everything up. And to me, one of the best compliments is when you look at the wiring, you can't tell that I did anything, mainly because it's so clean and tucked and done proper. So rather than just flopping it in and leaving the wiring on the top, we have pulled, extended, stripped a lot of extras. So we've started on the ECU side, getting everything bundled and taped up. Our connectors, this goes to our drive-by wire. LS people will know what these wires are. And if you're not an LS people, I'll tell you what those are. Those are for cruise control commands. So later on, if I want to, I'll be able to add cruise control. These are the power and fuse box wires and relay controls. These are the wires that run inside the car for some of the gauges and other functions, check engine light, diagnostics. We've got to go through and finish the engine side of tape up. Once that's all done, we get to move on to something a little more exciting. I've got a replacement set of headers in. These were again sent to us by the guys at J&J. Hopefully we'll be able to make these work. I'm thinking we'll pick it up and see if it even looks like it's going to tuck in close enough before we cut and modify them, because they're actually a really nice set of LG Motorsports headers. They're not a cheap set. So rather than starting off destroying them, we're going to see if destroying actually nets any benefit or if it's even worth the shot. Because all of the plans for the future of the truck revolve around traditional long tube or traditional exhaust manifolds. So we're hopefully going to be able to make this work. We were trying to dry fit the Corvette headers to see if it made sense to cut them before sliding them in. Also went to the truck manifold, and neither are going to work. What's happening is when we take our step off of the manifold and come down, we only have 4 inches from this center point out to work within, and even a factory manifold comes out at its widest point to 4 3/4 inch. So we physically can't fit that. With my car accessories, I can't flip manifolds like you would if we were going with the other type of forced induction. Again, we just keep running into small problems on our exhaust manifold front. But to have some positive news, we are going to slip that in with the transmission to see exactly what we're going to need to work around for trans-tunnel clearancing. So let's slip it in the hole, see how big of a struggle it is to get in there and how much wiggling we got to do, and see what problems we have waiting for us on that front. Boy, that's so easy to do, you know. It slides right in with no trouble at all. And by at all, I mean all of the trouble, and it's such a pain to do. And I still have to pull it out because we got to do the AC compressor still. Off camera, I slid that truck manifold in, and you can see we're not even close to mating up to the head, and we're in the frame rail. It's like this truck really wasn't built around the idea of having an LS engine shoved way down deep in its bowels. Our next big step is I pulled our lifting plate off. We're gonna go ahead and grab the truck manifold, slide it in, and make sure we're still good for phase 2. One-handed, there we go. And that's... oh, I didn't plan that out. Our fuel rail and intake manifold is hitting the firewall. So, how many problems can a stupid idea have? Can't fit exhaust manifolds. Alright, well I've got a car intake. But, one problem with this car intake is fuel injector wiring, some wire placement, throttle body wiring is all different. So, you know, that wiring harness I just finished, well, okay, so that fits. We can put an intake manifold on it, but I have to redo my fuel rail wiring, I have to do my throttle body wiring, and that completely ruins phase 2 unless I redo the firewall. So I have to decide what I want to do more. Fabricate a new firewall. I'm fabricating some type of header or manifold no matter what I do. Well, nobody said you can come up with exciting new things without complications. So it's a new day. Took some time thinking about the problems we were facing trying to get the LS tucked in and fit everything we need to. And of course, the best advice I'll ever be able to give you is when you're working on a car, a project, even if it's just a simple maintenance thing, if you hit a roadblock where you're just getting frustrated and you're not able to make any progress and it feels like there's no hope, walk away from it. 5 minutes, 10 minutes a day, just get away from it. You'll come up with a solution almost every time, and that's kind of where we're at right now. So we're gonna have to run the car intake for now, which is okay. I'm really close to a couple injector companies that have spacers that are gonna let me run the truck injectors so we don't have to change any injector connectors, and the bolt pattern for the throttle bodies are the same, so I can put the truck throttle body on the car intake manifold. So all of the things that had me discouraged are taken care of. The other thing, the more I've looked at and kind of worked around, I'm gonna need to notch this firewall. It's not a big deal. Nothing is gonna mount here. I can relocate where the factory bulkhead wiring connector came through, and it's gonna make life installing and removing this engine so much easier by having this extra clearance. So we're gonna actually bring it all the way back here to the flat section of the firewall, and basically have a line there and drop it down here, so we'll have a nice section there that'll make life easier. And then we'll get that AC compressor bolted on, because that came in after the engine's dropped down, because that's how life goes when you're trying to put a LS into the deep, deep holes of a 71 International pickup truck, because it never belonged there, but that's life. And then we've also got an idea for headers. Already have all the parts coming for it, so we'll actually probably have to introduce that one in the next episode, because it's gonna be a lot of work. And that's gonna do it for this episode of Wrench Every Day. It's been a lot of small, tedious work, all things that you have to get done. Hopefully next time along, we're gonna have the parts to finally come up with a solution to our exhaust manifold / header problem. We'll be able to start working on mounting our accelerator pedal position sensor inside the new gas pedal, work on the fuel system, and a couple other things to get us that much closer to firing up our 71 International Harvester, now called the Johnny Rev. Thank you, Tavarish, that was a good name. But again, appreciate you guys watching, spending the time with us. I'm Jared, reminding you to always make questionable choices and be the change you want the world to be. See ya.